choosing a subject for your part 3. Wow, well this is probably the most commonly asked question of PDIs is what subject should I do, or what's the best subject to do for a part 3? The answer is that is so unique and so individual to so many different factors, but predominantly you, that it's impossible to say do this or do that. So I can't sit here and give the advice to the masses that are watching in terms of what is best for you to do. However, there are 3 things that I want you to take into account when you are choosing your subject choice, and those 3 factors are the influence, if you like, as to what you are going to choose. The 3 factors that are going to be taken into account is your pupil, your area, and you. So let me explain what I mean by those. The lesson that you choose to do with your pupil has to be what is appropriate for that particular pupil. So you're needing to go off and demonstrate a lesson that gives the pupil what they need based on what they show that they're needing, on their experience and their ability, and what they bring to the car with them, if you like. So in terms of your pupil choice, that of course then dictates to a certain extent what it is that they're going to need. So, and we'll look at that when we're looking at your pupil choice as well. But that is the dominant factor in all of this, because it has to be a lesson that is appropriate to that particular pupil. So of course you're going to be influenced by your pupil choice. Now, obviously within that, we have the whole factor of whatever it is that you set out to do with that pupil might end up not being what you do on the day or within that time of the part 3. And so you're going to be influenced by that as well. But this is where the whole pupil thing has to be the centre of it. So you're taking the pupil, you're taking what that pupil needs, and you're delivering a lesson that's appropriate for that particular person. So be aware that that is going to be your big influencing factor. Second influencing factor is your area, and because your part 3 is probably going to be from your local test centre or wherever it is that you've booked your part 3 from, you are to a certain extent going to be restricted in what you should be doing based on that area. So for example, there is no point in deciding to take up a pupil who needs rural roads and country lanes if it's going to take you 17 minutes to get to a rural road or a country lane. That would not be an appropriate subject to be choosing. Or, for example, to take up people who wanted to do dual carriageways, and actually it was going to take a considerable amount of time to get through dual carriageways, to get to actually demonstrate those skills. So you need to be very aware of how your area also influences your choice. Now, what I would say about that is that the majority of test centres almost kind of lend themselves to be doing specific subjects. So for example, if I think about my local test area, whether I turn left or right out of it, almost immediately I'm going to be on roads in the middle of a housing estate that have parked cars on them, and we're going to have some meeting situations that happen. Well, if I'm going to have to spend 5 or 6 minutes doing meeting situations, or my pupil coping with meeting situations to get to the roundabouts that I wanted to do, why don't I just do meeting situations? If they're given to me on a plate and I'm going to have to be talking about them, or people's going to be demonstrating their skills in them, I could just think, great, what a perfect area to do meeting situations. So think about your local area and think about what you've got. Think about it in terms of, if I was to turn left, what have I got? If I've got to turn right, what have I got? If I was to go to that roundabout and take the first exit left, where does that naturally lead me in terms of the subject choice that would be best for my pupil? So think about your area, because if you can exploit your area without having to go miles out of your local test centre area to get to the area that is going to give the people the most experience of what it is that they're wanting to get to, the problems with that is that it causes all those issues in that 14-15 minute drive that you've got before you get to that area. So think about your area, exploit your area. And of course the third factor is you. And I don't think that it's a problem acknowledging that all of you will have your strengths and all of you will have your challenges. So you'll have the areas that you know that you're a little bit weak on perhaps, or you're still needing to develop, or you just don't feel comfortable with. I want you to think about your part 3 being your ability to, again, exploit the things that you're good at. So if you are feeling comfortable and you enjoy teaching a particular subject, and the chances are you feel comfortable and enjoy it because you know it and you get it and you understand it, and when you do teach it, 9 times out of 10 it works. Pupils are on the same wavelength as you. The way that you've got to explain it, the methods that you use, the tools and techniques, they just seem to click and just come together. Then exploit that. So if you've got perhaps a passion for teaching roundabouts and you've got ways of describing them that you know pupils have those light bulb moments, then hey, got roundabouts just down the road from your test centre? You could go and exploit roundabouts. Clearly it needs to be what the pupil needs and in a way that pupil needs, but that could be your influencing factor. If, for example, you are not feeling particularly comfortable or knowledgeable in a particular subject yourself, or even if you struggle to do that yourself. So for example, if you know that you have a weakness, for example, on doing a particular maneuver, or you know that you're not quite sure how you would teach somebody emerging onto a dual carriageway, don't go putting yourself in that situation where you're going to highlight your weakness. Now, this is something that you're probably all aware of. As you've been training, you will be aware of what you're enjoying, what you're not enjoying, what you feel like you get, what you don't get. So be aware of that. Of course, if you have a trainer as well, it's worth your trainer also pointing out in terms of your strengths and abilities within your teaching, what they feel that you are really good at demonstrating, and go and exploit those things. So those are your 3 influencing factors: your pupil, and that's predominantly the main one, the pupil's needs, your area, and you, and how you're feeling about a particular subject. Now, there are just a little handful of things that are not appropriate for a part 3. The official 3 things that are not appropriate for a part 3 is a theory-based classroom lesson. So you can't just sit in the car with your iPad logging on to Theory Test Pro and doing an hour's worth of theory test with a pupil. Whether the pupil needs it or not, it's not an appropriate demonstration of the skills that they're wanting to see on a part 3. The second one is off-roading, so you can't go on a nice off-road obstacle course and demonstrate that. And the third one is an emergency service vehicle training that breaks the rules or the regulations. So in other words, you couldn't take up a student paramedic or ambulance driver, for example, and do 38 in a 30 because you're learning how to drive a car faster than road conditions perhaps are letting you. So it's not that kind of ability to do that. You're not going to get away with that. Now, it doesn't mean that you couldn't take up a student paramedic and be doing awareness and planning continuous movement. That would be absolutely fine. You just can't break the rules or regulations to be able to do that. So those are the 3 official things that you can't do. I would also suggest that there are 1 or 2 things that you might want to think about how you do these, how you demonstrate these, and whether they would fit the criteria and allow you to demonstrate the 17 competencies. Taking up a beginner, because you need to be very aware of the fact that the examiners are wanting to see the wheels moving. They want to see a practical skill being taught and demonstrated, and those skills, those abilities being gained by a pupil. And so there is this kind of feeling that if you're taking up a beginner and somebody who's never done something before, or perhaps even their first lesson, that you may well be stationary for longer than would be advisable, and certainly longer than would be demonstrating your practical teaching skills. So anything that is going to mean that you perhaps slip into some kind of instructor-led lecture, if you like, with lots of words rather than lots of doing and demonstrating, or the pupil demonstrating their learning, that's something you need to think about. Now, it could be that you are really enjoy your beginner lessons for a pupil in those first few hours, and that you don't sit at the side of the road and chat about things and get out books and do lots of stationary things, and that actually you have a way, a style of you that allows you and your pupils to crack on and demonstrate it. So certainly I would feel that I'm very comfortable in my ability to take a brand new pupil and be moving within minutes. But if that's not familiar with you, and if that's not how you've been trained or been shown how to do beginner lessons, then it could well be that your style is very different to mine, and you may be sitting for longer doing the talky kind of stuff. that's not going to cut the mustard on the part 3. So be aware of the stage of your pupil. We talk more about that when we talk about pupil choices. The next possibility of things to be thinking about is a manoeuvre. Now, although on the form you'll see a recap manoeuvre as being one of those top most common things that is demonstrated on a part 3, notice it says recap a manoeuvre, so it's not saying a manoeuvre from a beginning, so introducing a brand new manoeuvre to a pupil who's never done it before. So even within there you can hear the hint that the DVSA are basically saying, we don't want you sitting at the side of the road doing an instructor-led briefing. Now this is, I guess, to a certain extent a little old-fashioned again, a little bit like the kind of beginner's theory about not taking a beginner, based on this theory that the DVSA presume that if you're going to take up a pupil who's never done something before, the chances are you're going to be more stationary, it's going to be more instructor-led and theory-based. That might not necessarily be the case. So again, depending on how you've trained, depending on your teaching styles and the tools and techniques you've been doing, you may be able to introduce a manoeuvre and get a pupil to be demonstrating manoeuvres where they're very rarely stationary, and it's certainly not a lecture-based approach. I know, for example, the way that I would do manoeuvre, my pupil is moving perhaps more than they would be moving if we were sitting at junctions looking at observations at junctions. So of course it's very determined and by you and your style and what you know. But I understand the principle behind the fact that although you could do manoeuvre, be a little bit aware again of the disadvantages or the assumptions that might come if you're going to do a manoeuvre. So it's not banned, but there are considerations that you want to take into account. And the third one I would suggest that you just think about is a mock test. Now clearly if you're going to go up for 35 minutes worth of your test not speaking because you are playing the role of a driving examiner on an L test where all you're doing is fault identifying but anonymously, so you're not necessarily sharing that with the pupil, making notes and giving directions, how are you demonstrating the 17 competencies? And it doesn't necessarily bode well if you're going to be pretty much silent for 35 minutes of your test. However, I'm not going to completely dismiss mock tests as a possible subject choice. And I want you to go and look at the live chat, I think it is, that we have, the video that we have about mock tests, because if you watch that, you'll see there's some very, very clever ways of doing mock tests, of which you're rarely silent, and your role is very specific, and your pupil's role is very specific, and the two of you are working in a teamwork approach in a mock test kind of scenario. But there are numerous very clever ways of conducting the mock test which actually could work really well on a part 3, including the possibility of doing a proper structured mock test just before the part 3 and making the result of that mock test the big reveal actually at the point where the examiner gets into the car. So if people doesn't know what you would have judged that mock test as, so whether they passed or failed or what faults they have committed, and that conversation then becomes the structure of the part 3 itself, and you then go off and fix what it was that the people committed the faults on or potentially failed the mock test with. So a mock test before the part 3 could work really well. But those are just my kind of top of my head thoughts about the things that are going to influence your subject choice and the subjects that you might want to be thinking about in terms of not doing.